وكل أوان وإلى الأبد آمين. بتأسف لكم على التأخير البسيط النهاردة، كان في بس مشكلة في النت، لكن نشكر ربنا قدرنا نحلها علشان ما نلغيش اجتماعنا النهاردة. اتفضلوا نصلي وبعدين نبدأ موضوع اليوم. بسم الله والابن والروح القدس الإله الواحد آمين. اذكر يا رب اجتماعاتنا باركها، أعطي أن تكون لنا بغير مانع ولا عائق، نصنعها حسب مشيئتك المقدسة الطوبوية، بيوت صلاة، بيوت طهارة، بيوت بركة انعم بيها علينا يا رب وعلى عبيدك الآتين بعدنا الأبد. قم أيها الرب الإله تفرج جميع أعدائك وليهرب من أمام وجهك كل مبغضي اسمك القدوس، وأما شعبك فليكن بالبركة ألوف ألوف وربوات ربوات يصنعون مشيئتك بالنعمة ورأفات ومحبة البشر اللواتي ابنك وحيد الجنس ربنا إلهنا ومخلصنا يسوع المسيح، هذا الذي من قبله المجد والإكرام والعز والسجود طليق بك مع من روح القدس ومحن يساوي لك الآن وكل أوان ظهر الدور كلها آمين. واجعلنا مستحقين أن نقول بشكر أبانا الذي في السماوات ليتقدس اسمك، ليأتي ملكوتك، لتكن مشيئتك كما في السماء كذلك على الأرض. خبزنا الذي الغد أعطينا اليوم، واغفر لنا ذنوبنا كما نغفر نحن أيضا المذنبين إلينا، ولا تدخلنا في تجربة لكن نجينا من الشرير بالمسيح يسوع ربنا، لأن لك الملك والقوة والمجد إلى الأبد آمين. بسم الله والابن والروح القدس إله واحد آمين. أفكركم باختصار شديد الموضوع بتاعنا.
That we've been talking about for several weeks. We're talking about family topics. We're talking about the pillars upon which a Christian house stands. And we had mentioned that there are 12 pillars. We finished 10 of them, and tonight we'll finish the last 2. So we'll only have 2 more times left. And we finished the family topic, and then we can address another one. I'd also like to remind you of the 10 pillars which we discussed. We said that the Christian house is founded on Christ. A house built on rock, and Christ being the rock. It's a strong house and nothing moves it at all because it's built upon rock. So no matter what winds or tornadoes or twisters or waves crash upon it, nothing will break it, for it's a house built on rock. But a house that's built on sand is weak and frail. The slightest test will make it collapse. The house is a foundation, and there are pillars. As said, likewise the church, there are 12 pillars. So we focus upon 12 principles in the Christian household. Meaning that what should a Christian house be built upon, so that it will be a house that stands and have a strong integrity to it. And this is very important for us to understand. Before one proceeds to marriage, he has to completely understand the gravity of the responsibility of what I'm proceeding to go into. Do you understand or you don't? Or am I just going into something that I don't understand, or something that I'm basically not up for? So I highly encourage those, our children who are about to get married, to listen to all these lectures so they can comprehend. Christ said to calculate the cost. So before you go into proceed to any project, understand it and calculate it and understand the expenses. Because so marriage is this ultimate project, because it's the one project that lasts with you your whole life. So it includes the rest of your life from the time they made that decision all the way to the end of our existence on earth. So this is a very critical decision, and we have to make that decision correctly, because there are no second chances in that. We said there are 12 pillars, and we'll look at each one of them, and we could arrange. And this could be a preparation. First thing after you need to leave, that a man should leave his father and mother, meaning that the two sides, that each will leave the family of origin, and then they will proceed to form this new family, or this new entity, which is the new family, which he's the king. That's why we put a crown on him, and she's the queen, and we put a crown on her as well. And this will be the kingdom that will begin to establish, and Lord willing, God will possibly give them children. He has to forget that he has to feel that, that he's the king in his home. She rules, and she must also sense that she's the queen in her household. So you can't have the mother of the husband or mother of the wife or the father of who are those who are controlling their married children. That doesn't work at all. They have to leave their kids to establish this new entity and to choose for themselves. And if the upbringing is correct, they will be capable to live a life, and they could return to them in the slightest things. That they don't have to call them every time and give them a whole news bulletin of what's going on. So this is leaving. It's physical leaving, that they physically leave them, house, and emotionally and symbolically, meaning that symbolically I'm willing to leave the house to spend the life with the person who loved me and I loved them back. Number two, responsibility. To be up to responsibility. In order to be up to responsibility, I have to be mature, physically mature, meaning full man or full female. That's physical. And spiritual. Spiritually, to understand the responsibility, and emotionally I should be ready that I don't have any complexes that would compromise the marriage. If anyone has any emotional causes that prevent me, they have to be financially mature, meaning that they're capable to provide for a family, or that the two of them can talk about financial matters. Emotionally mature, meaning that they could focus on one person, that he or she chooses just one human being, and they cannot lay eyes on anyone else. That if I choose that person, then I close the door of comparing them or looking at someone else. That's not permitted. End of story. That's number two. Number three, love. Love must be, because these are feelings that each one needs, and they must receive them from within the framework of marriage. And if they don't receive these feelings within the framework of marriage, where else would they go and find it? They have to be filled from a family, love from within a family context, from husband and wife and mother and father. We said that there are 5 languages: good words, spend quality time, gift giving, acts of service, and physical touch. Very, very briefly, we're just covering all the points. And then we talked about respect, and we said that respect doesn't mean that just that there's love, then I should just take them for granted. No, it means that I also have to respect them. And this is one of the strong pillars that make a marriage stand and last. You see how our grandparents used to have marriages that lasted for lifetimes, and that's why they had strong marriages. And to the very respect of that sacrament, that if they respect that relationship, because now respect is diminished, we see the opposite of that. Number 5, we talked about trust and transparency, that one is part of the other. So both go together. Imagine if there is no trust, that each one doubts the other. How could they live together? That they doubt, that they have to have this element of trust. And trust is built. And this gives us an indication or a conclusion that time of engagement has to be a little long to build this trust. Because if you're getting married and you're supposing that once problems happen that they will divorce, then they're not in the mindset that this is the choice that I'll spend the rest of my life with. So there must be trust and transparency between the two of them. And then the following time we talked about cooperation and dialogue, to be comparable and equal. Today we'll talk about equal. Last time we talked about a helper, how that they would have help and cooperation between the two of them in several aspects and cooperation. And we said that the most important thing is to cooperate for their salvation. So each one understands that I am responsible for that, for him, and she's responsible for me. That we work with each other so that we can help each other, and for the salvation of our children. And we help each other throughout life's obstacles. And also, Christian marriage is built on conversation, on dialogue, that I can let out my feelings, I can talk about anything, not afraid, or I'm worried that someone will judge me for what I'll say, but I'll find a loving, faithful heart that will listen to me and give me the right counsel. The last time we talked about security, and sacrifice. Safety is to feel safe. If all of these things that we talked about exist, that one will feel safe. One will feel safe that I am willing to leave everything and to live with that human being, with him or with her. Living in a sense of safety, not worried about anything, that I'm relaxed, not afraid, not feeling that there could be cheating or infidelity. That's why you should have loyalty and fidelity, and so on and so forth. And self-sacrifice that each one. Today we will talk about the last two pillars. And I think that if we talked about those 12 pillars and we understood it very well, believe me, problems in our homes will decrease at least 90%, if not more, if we're able to understand these things. Today we'll speak through the grace of Christ. We'll talk about submission and concessions, that there should be concession from both sides. And these are concepts that have to exist for those who want to get married. They must understand and recognize that each side should be subject to the other. And what's the concept of subjecting to one another in the Christian sense? And then we'll talk about concessions, how to meet in the middle. So let's start with the topic of submission. In the epistle of our teacher, St. Paul, to Ephesians chapter 5, that's read to us when we're getting married, what do we say in it? We say, women, be subject to your husbands as to the Lord, meaning submit. We want to understand, what does that word mean? Because this irritates people, both sides, as though that there is a master somehow, a presumptive Mr. Master, and she has to somehow be submissive to him. Absolutely not. Absolutely, it's nothing like that. We'll see how. We'll see if we just have to read the rest of the verse. If we read the following verse, we'll understand what St. Paul meant. But let's take it one by one. But if we went to this verse 21, this is verse 21. If we go, 22, verse 22. If we go one verse before, that submitting one to another in the fear of the Lord, that you are submitting to one another in the fear of the Lord. He's talking to the faithful. So here there's a mutual submission, okay? In the fear of God, meaning that when we have the fear of God in our hearts, that we would be submitting to one another, that no one is getting too arrogant or haughty over the other. So what does it mean when you say women be subject to your men? Let's understand the types of submission. What does it mean? For example, the first thing we'll call submission of slavery, that there is a master and there is a slave. Or sometimes you have a mistress and a slave, if the female is the mastering side. So this is a slavery dynamic, or an enslavement dynamic, and this has domineering and cruelty, to use my power and so on and so forth. There's another type. There is a submission out of need. What does submission of need mean? Meaning, the other side makes me feel that if I do not comply or fulfill what they did, that I'll be somehow punished. I'll be forbidden or lose the privilege of something. So this is submission out of need. Making me remain with him is need. The third type, submission of love. What does submission of love mean? Meaning that out of my own will, my own choice, I decided that I will submit to that human being because I see in them that they are sacrificing themselves and that they are giving up their comfort and giving up everything for me. So therefore I submit to him with my loving will. So the first type is slavery, a slavery of submission, where there is fear, and there is domineering, and there is feudalism, and there is this power. And then the second type of submission out of need, where you could basically shame someone, or you could force someone to say that I am tired, but I have to stay with him because I'm basically not happy, but I have to remain with him because of the scandal, or for the kids, because if I leave him, I'll not find a place to live, because he is dominating, or he is basically pressing the submission out of need. That show me, if you will walk out on me, how will you live? Where will you live? What will you do? Hey, he keeps threatening. You will not see the kids again. And he keeps giving threats and all these things. This is not Christian. This is not in Christianity. These are not Christian manners. And this should not be the concept of submission at all. What is submission in Christianity? It's a submission of love. Let's understand it more. It says in the definition of this type of submission of love, a true desire, a genuine desire to be submitted to someone else, and to agree to that, and to show your submission to them. So there is an element of need, and there is agreement, and there is an offering of submission. Why? Based on what? That is based upon a person is fully confident, that I'm fully trusting that person, that I submit to them in that sense, because I trust him completely, and I submit to him all love and all respect and all appreciation. So when we get to the fullness of this love and appreciation and respect and all of these matters that we talked about before, she trusts him, and she offers him her submission of love of choice. He becomes the head by default, but she submits to him because her nature, the woman or the wife, would like to submit to a man when he executes his role as a true head of this unit. I want first to make it very gloomy, and to give you the darkest, worst scenario of submission, so that when we come to brighten it up, we can understand. Because when we contrast the darkest scenario to the brightest scenario, you can appreciate the difference. So I'm going to give you the very bleak antithesis of what this is. The idea of domineering, that it's attributed to a French officer. His name is Marquis de Sade. So sadism, that's how in English the word sadism comes from. He was a very dark, mentally disturbed human being. Look at this bleak, bad image. The idea of submission, that some could think that submission is this. Of course, this is not in Christian culture whatsoever. That is coming from other areas that have nothing to do with us. Those who think in that way, those who think that the woman is base or lesser. But we see that Christianity achieves equality with women, and that there are lesser of so and so. We don't have such notions, because this is not a Christian notion. This is not us. So this sadism is to submit the person to the extreme levels of submission, and to completely control and domineer the other person, so that they become a tool in their hand, that they lose their humanity, that they lose their dignity, and they become a mere instrument that exists for their for my pleasure. It has nothing to do. This is the first wrong concept of this sadism. Number two, that the objective is not to completely control the person, but to abuse and to control them and to completely deplete all of their energies financially and spiritually, and to enjoy that depletion, meaning that they want them to work like that. And meaning this is the problem, and this is a problem I see a lot. He works, he sends his wife to work, and he takes all of her money, as that's a way of basically having some sadism over her, and then not just appreciate after that because she puts all that work, and then he gives her a nice word or something. He subjugates her and he insults her, and a love of control, and to completely deplete their energy financially and spiritually, and to keep humiliating the other person, to humiliate her and to enjoy humiliating her. I'm telling you, this is the extreme clinical sick condition, so that when we start talking about the submission of love, we can contrast it to these definitions that I'm talking about now. These things, these definitions exist. This is not fictional, and I see it. Number three, in the desire of inflicting pain and harm for the sake of taking pleasure in them suffering and being in pain, meaning that when they're in pain and that they are weeping from that pain, I'm happy. So this is sick. This is clinically sick, that when I'm laughing or enjoying or amused at the pain and being domineering of someone else, and I'm humiliating them, that somehow makes me happy. So he wishes that the other would be completely subjugate and insulted. And in a position of suffering and helplessness. I just wanted to draw this bleak imagery to you. It's a bleak image, but it exists, unfortunately. What does it say? What's his defense, or what's his justification? What is he thinking? No normal-minded person would consider this right or natural, but he would tell you, because he would say, well, I know what's good for the family. And she doesn't have a brain? Is she less of a mind or a brain for us to completely eliminate her mind? It's a question. But his thinking that I know where the right interest is, he basically justifies that. It considers that the world, of course, he himself could have been harmed before when he was a child or something, that someone harmed him somehow. So therefore, his approach in life, that if he was harmed, then he has to continue to harm even the closest person to them. So he meets harm with similar harm to defend himself. So his approach in life is how I would defend myself by harming others because I got harmed. Of course, in all this, he will need a weak person to basically use this domineering sadist mentality, and he will always live with this victim mentality, that he's the victim and so on and so forth. Okay, this bleak, terrible picture of what submission is. We said that this is the extreme. This is the extreme. But I wish to say, sometimes we don't get to this extreme. Although it exists, I repeat, we could not get to this extreme sometimes, but we could be in a gray area. Because when you say black and white, there's a gray. But because there's a gray if there's 0 and 100, for example, 100 being the complete worst, people could be at 70, 80, meaning that they're pretty close to that dark 100%. They don't have to be at 100, but they're pretty close. But anyone who applies these notions basically has this sadist tendencies or leaning towards sadism, that they cannot sympathize with others. We see in Christ when he saw the woman who was the widow, whose only boy died. He sympathized with her. He had compassion on her. He was gentle. He was kind-hearted. He has good human feelings. But someone who sees someone else who's in pain, and this is a source for them to be joy, that's a problem. Of course, they need help, medical help. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. They need help because they must have been harmed or didn't give love, so therefore now are incapable of rendering or giving love. That someone must have really harmed them. So what does Christianity believe in? Let's read in the first epistle of our teacher, St. Paul, 1 Corinthians 11:11. 1. 1 Corinthians 11:11. For a man without a woman is without, for a woman is without a man, and a man is without a woman in the Lord. This is equality. That a man is that a man is not without a woman. That is basically that a man is not lesser, to confirm that there is equality, nor is the woman lesser than a man. What also does St. Paul say? In Galatians 3:28, no Jew, no Greek, no free, nor slave, no male, nor female, for you are all one in Christ our Lord. In Christ Jesus, excuse me. Of course, God, as we said in the very beginning, in the summary, in the very beginning, that when God created man, or created Eve, he told her to be a comparable helper. We talked about comparable, and today we're talking about equal, comparable. So when God created her from the rib of the side, so she wouldn't be from the head to be higher, nor from the feet or the legs that she would be lower. God took her from the side, meaning that there is the notion or the concept of equality was already hardwired into it. So after this long introduction, what does it mean to submit in the end? It's a submission, it's a consented, willing, circumstantial submission that she chooses to be submitted to the man, and it's not out of any force, domineering, or humiliation, that it's a choice, consented, that she chooses, and it's not imposed, nor is it to humiliate or to force this upon someone. Meaning what? That a Christian family is a unit. A Christian family is a unit. Every family is a unit, independent unit of the rest of the other families, but they're still connected in the flesh of Christ. But as a unit, it has an independent entity that must have a head. Like the people who study what is the best system, they said the pyramid system is the best system. They have the inverse or upside down pyramid that it looks like this, and then there's a side up pyramid where you have just one at the top, and then you have a vine that looks like a grapevine that each cluster is by itself. So they studied all these systems. So the best system is an upright pyramid shape, that you have to have a head, and through the head you run the entire entity in management. So one must be this head. So they said, okay, when God placed man and woman, he said which one would be the head and which one would be the body, right? So it's clear here that Christianity says that the man is the head of the woman, and this makes the woman the body. Just as Christ is the head of the church, and the church is therefore the body. And this is where the analogy is that we have. That's what I'm telling you. Read. Let's read so we can understand what St. Paul meant. Imagine, if you will, that if the two of the same strength and the same power and the same stubbornness, for example, imagine if they both want to make a decision, right? Wouldn't that be very clashing? That each one would say, my way, or the highway, right? Either my way, or my opinion, and the other would say, then it won't happen. I remember my father, one of the things you never forget, that a boat with two skippers or two captains will sink. So you can't have two heads. They will butt heads. And it must be a head. So there must be one head for this unit, for this family. The man with his qualities, with his qualifications, qualifies to be the head. I don't understand what it means. And a woman with her configuration is suitable to be the body, and they both complement each other. But if it's turned upside down, disaster. Let's read St. Paul. Let's continue seeing what he said. Women, be submissive to your men as to the Lord. That's what we read in the beginning. Meaning that obedience here, or subjection here, is to the Lord and like the Lord. For the man is the head of the woman. He's explaining this. He's explaining why is this order so in this way. Why should the woman submit? Submission of love and choice. For the man is the head of the woman, as Christ is also the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the flesh. So, when he's giving the man the responsibility that he's the quote-unquote head in this entity, this family entity, he's telling him, you, man, must carry out your role just as Christ carried out his role towards the church. So the church became submissive to Christ. So no man would come and say that I am the man that she must submit. No. Wrong concept, wrong notion. When you offer the same love that Christ offered to the church, she will naturally submit to you by nature, by her nature. This is her nature. You carry out your role as a man, just as Christ carried out her role to the church. You'll find her automatically submitted to you because she naturally yearns for a man to lean upon. And I'll tell you this, when you fail to carry out your role as a man, you will find that she does not respect, or she does not sense something to respect. That a head that only brings about pain or headache, or a head that is helpless or useless, really. So the idea that the Apostle Paul here explains a very natural occurring dynamic, that just as Christ sacrificed himself for the church, man, husband, Mr. Guy, to apply yourself with love and sacrifice for your wife and for your family. And when she sees that, she will render back all love, all obedience, all respect, and all submission very simply. For example, when a man is confident in himself, and a woman is also confident in the natural way of things, she would tell him that you are my head. What does it mean? Leadership, that he leads the family, protects the family, that he's up to responsibility, that she can depend on him, that she could resort to him when she needs any advice. He's a man. So she would tell him, you are the head. And he would tell her what in exchange? And you are the crown of my head. Believe me, when we have the right comprehension of things, we could tell each other the right things. Because in the book of Proverbs, chapter 12, it says that a good woman or a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband. A good woman who gets it, who gets her role and carries out her role in this entity is a crown to her man. And you would tell her that you are the crown of my head. What does that mean? Meaning that I take pride in you, meaning that you add beauty to me, that he tells her this. Just as the saying goes that behind every great person is a woman when she is a wise woman, and he would point her out and say, this is my wife. And he would say in front of people how he is proud that she is the crown of my head. What's the rest of the verse? As for the shameful one, as pain in his bones, meaning that she puts that a shameful wife, that if she go every time they go out, she just talks all the time and speaks inappropriately and just talks about the house or what's the relationship with her husband. You find that she just lets everyone out because she's the shameful one. As a pain in his bones. That's in Proverbs 12:4. And there's another verse in the book of Proverbs that the wisdom of a woman builds her house, and her foolishness destroys it with her hand. And here he places upon the woman the responsibility of building the house and raising the children, how to deal with the husband, how to understand his nature, how to promote him, and how to keep the secrets of her home and not to just let everything out, and not to talk about her kids, to be a wise person. And there's also something about this good woman. It's a full chapter that goes into thorough description of what a good woman or a virtuous woman is. But then let's see, this is the right arrangement, or this is how things should be. And then when you have, when the relationship is not proper, as you tell her, and when he tells her, I am the head, and she would respond and say, and I am the neck that moves that head. That's how they go tit for tat. So we have to understand what's the right dynamic of submission, a submission of love, that each one carries out their role. Okay. Therefore, so we want to understand what is the concept of a right head, that a man is the head of a woman, that a head cannot do without a body. We never saw a head on its own or a body on its own. They could torture a saint in all forms of torture, but when they completely despair, they chop the head off, because there is no head by itself or body itself. We heard of a heart transplant or liver transplant or a kidney transplant, that they can transplant organs and change in many organs. But we never in our life heard of a head transplant. We can't chop someone's head off and transplant it onto another head. Never happened. Why? Because this is the whole entity. If it's severed, it's no longer an entity. So no head does without the body, nor body without head. That's the first concept, that we cannot separate them. What God put together, no man can put apart, that we cannot separate. The head has the mind, decision, thinking, and sacrifice for the body. But what does the body have? The body has the heart, love, compassion, and caring. Meaning, so the mother is the fountain of love and affection in this entity, and the man is the source of thinking and managing and planning for the family. But we'll see, not by himself. The head leads the body, the whole body, and the body carries and sustains. Meaning that what's carrying the head is the whole body. that is carried on the body. As we say that behind every great man is a woman. And when we begin to talk to the Tasonis, the wives of priests, we tell them, you Tasoni, Abuna is carrying the church, and you are carrying Abuna. That we thank every priest's wife for the love and sacrifice that she offers for the sick. Because Abuna is carrying the cares of the whole church and the congregation of the church. But who's carrying Abuna? And carrying the home? The wife of Abuna. So you give all appreciation and recognition to every priest's wife who helps her husband in service, in her role of carrying Abuna. That she would be, that it carries the whole head. Fourth concept, that there is a complementary dynamic between the body and the head. Not as far as position, but as far as not status, but positionality. Meaning that this is where the head is and this is where the body is, but it's the same significance, and there's equality between the head and the body. And the proof of that is that St. Paul, because he used the analogy of the human anatomy or the human body, what did he say? And as for the head of Christ is God. Isn't there equality? The biggest proof to you that there is equality, that the head of Christ is God. That's when St. Paul, how is that when he is of one essence with the Father? Because Christ as a humanity offers the submission of the church to God. Christ, who has equality between him and the Father, between the Father and the Son, of one essence with the Father, yet, what does it mean that the head of Christ is God? The Christ being the head of the church, he offers submission to God, and through this we understand that submission here doesn't mean that there's someone higher. No, this is a submission of love, a submission of obedience, a submission of economy, a submission of equality. And this is the right concept of submission. So therefore, the right dynamic is to submit, that he makes decisions and he eliminates her. No, she's a human being. So he must have an equal involvement in everything. That he should not make a decision until before getting back to her. And if the kids grow up, they must be involved with them as well. So teach them life and how to make decisions. What else? There is no problem to fulfill her desires, to satisfy her, to make her happy. There's a saying that goes, happy wife, happy life. That you will make her happy, she will bring out the best in her. And you give her a hard time, she'll give her a hard time. And they are, thank God, well, they are, like that. I will not get myself into trouble. Pope Shenouda, may God rest his soul. One time, telling him, Sayyidina, my wife is the upsetting type. So Pope Shenouda's reply was there another type, my son? It's just a joke. It's just a joke. Saint Mary is above our heads. And she exceeded everything. And our women are great and beautiful. But we just like once in a while, just in the middle of the meeting, just to have some comic relief. In very, very rare cases, the man must make a decision. You know, here in the country, the president of the country, they say, in the case of emergency, they give him the the right not to get back to the Congress or the Senate or anything because he's the head. That in certain times, critical times, in certain emergencies, that someone can make an emergency. No, we can't convene and discuss and talk about this. That if they both disagree and there's no basically agreement on something and nothing that's critical, the woman must submit to the man in these cases. And it's possible that if things are really bad in this situation and they don't know what to do, then we can involve Abuna the priest, because he has to be neutral and he has to help the two of them. So that's the notion of submission, and I hope that we would have understood the equality and that the submission is submission of love and choice when a man carries out his role in the family, just as Christ offered love and sacrifice to the church. Church offered him love and submission. The last pillar is the pillar or the idea of concession. Concession. Let me read to you part of the epistle of our teacher, Saint Paul, chapter 7, starting with verse 32. To understand what's this idea of concession. What does Saint Paul say, our teacher Saint Paul? Though he who is not married cares to the Lord how to please the Lord. He who is not married only worry about his relationship with God, but he who is married cares how to care for his wife. So here St. Paul places the number one in my life as a married person is how to satisfy my wife. That every husband would say this. My role is to not to upset my wife. And there's a very tough verse that says, your prayers would not be obstructed. So someone who upsets his wife and you pray, God would say, I will not listen to you. Why? Because you upset your wife. So don't upset your wife. And then he would say that between a virgin and a wife is a difference. She who is not married to care for what is to God, to satisfy God, and she who she's married should care for how to please her man. So how to please her man is the care as for her. So a married human being has two things he has to care, is to care for God, but has to also care for the other person. Those who's not married, who's a monk, for example, chose that I just want to live with God, so all he cares about is how to care for God. Okay. So marriage, Christian marriage, is built on the idea of concession. What does concession mean? One time I was sitting with an engineer, so he explained to me, we were talking about this matter, so he explained to me, just as we build, he works in building bridges, so he explained to me something that I didn't understand. He says, when we come to build a bridge, I used to think that we used to start here and then we go on to the other side, or from the other side to the other side. He said, no. He gave me a very beautiful analogy. When a bridge is built, it's built like this from both sides, and then they seal it off and it becomes a bridge. So if we consider that this is marriage life, that they get married and each one is coming from a family, meaning that they're coming from two systems. There's something in psychology called two-family system, that he's coming from a system and from another different system. Each one is doing the things on their way, on how they're used to in their family. When they come to get married, they'll find, no matter how well they know each other, they will find drastic differences when they live together. Realistically, I'll give you some examples that I've seen. They will clash with one another when they find that they're not agreeing. They used to see each other and talk and go out, but there's some things that are not known until after marriage. So the idea of how to satisfy the other, that is the concern of each person before they get married, that they're ready to forsake certain things to satisfy the other. And if everyone has that mentality, that I'm willing to give up a little bit, we will be able to meet in the middle. But if each side is of the mind of that you must change, then that just failed from the start. When someone is on their own before they're married and is single, they do everything according to how they like. But when they get married, they must understand the following. I have another human being. Excuse me, if you have a dog at home, they must take him home and make him walk him for the dog to do his business, give him food, give him water. And this is all for a dog. Now, if I have a human being, I have to be considerate to that other human being. Sometimes, believe me, we give care to pets more than we give it to human beings who live with us under the same house. So I must be ready in the marriage to concede my comfort, to concede my opinion sometimes, to concede of my ego sometimes. We're very tired of our ego, that I must do what I'm set to do in my head. No, I have to concede to that sometimes. And all of these are Christian virtues that we need to train for. That's why I told you before that Christian marriage is a school of virtue. That's true. The Christian marriage is a school of virtue, that I'll always live in virtue if I can marry properly and live a married life as God has ordained it, just as it was divinely preordained, not as the world promotes to us. That's why it's very easy now to break it up very easily. Why? Because we were never founded on the right principles or the cardinal principles of what marriage is in the Christian sense. So the world basically operates on the notion of don't exhaust yourself, just be as comfortable as you need to be. But the idea of marriage is how to persevere, how to fight for this marriage to succeed at any price. Okay. Each one of us were brought up in a certain way, in the family of origin, meaning the family, the parents that I came from. So each one is coming, I took from these parents and those parents took from their parents. So there is a family trend, or there is a nature to the characteristic of each family. Come to another family getting married, you find differences. That's why it is said, according to studies, that a person who comes to marry has one of two things. They either will look for someone resembling the other side, that the girl looks for someone who's like her father, that she got used to deal with this kind of personality. Even if she's a tough personality, she looks for someone who's tough. Why? Because it baffles me. So, like a lady, she's getting seeing someone who's a very tough guy with very bad temper and upsets her. He makes her cry, and he says, "Why do you do this?" He says, "Well, he loves me." If there's someone who loves you, make you cry every day, why does she stick to that? Because she got used to get treated with this type of character, which was her father, that her father treated her. So this is what she knows, or that's her reference. Or he tries to look for someone like his mother. If it's a controlling mother, he looks for a controlling wife or controlling woman. And it baffles me. I didn't really understand this until we studied. I began to notice this. It's very strange. I used to think that when someone finds something like this, he will decide that they will never take someone like their father or like their mother if it's problematic. Of course, we said in the beginning that the right marriage is that I want to decide the image, or I want to decide the story that I saw in the father or mother, if it's a successful marriage. But when it's a lot of problems, each side is looking for someone who is the opposite of that. But you find something very strange, that they choose the same personality. Or someone who is aware is like, no, 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 no. I can never marry someone who's like so and so, because he understood. He became aware. So anyway, I'm just shedding light on the idea of that the system that I come from. I'm trying, when I proceed to get married, I try to implement it in the new family, or apply it in the new family. So if there are two systems, beginning is very tough. That's why the beginnings are very difficult. That's why the very first year of marriage is the toughest year. I liken it to, when the plane goes up, this is turbulence. Fasten your seatbelt. And you have to stay in your seat and not get up, because there's still bumps, turbulent bumps. But after the first and second years, you start going into cruise mode. You could get up and you could move, and so on and so forth. So the first year in marriage is like, it's a very turbulent first year. A lot of bumps. So they have to know from the very beginning that these turbulence will exist, and they have to be ready for it. I'll tell you a few points. And it could be very small things, but all of these things accumulate, and you feel that this is what we did. Examples. Someone that there are a lot of problems, but these little things. Could you believe he will get up and not fix his bed? And he says, because we're going to mess it up again, so why fix it? And I used to tell myself, how many people do that? But she cannot imagine, how could he get up and not fix his bed? She's used to, when she gets up, she must fix her bed. It became a fight. Why? Because you have to fix the bed. So I know people who say what? When they love each other. We would say, those who get up late have to fix the bed. See how they fixed it? Or they solved it? And that's what they agreed on. And those who are not used to fixing the bed had to concede in order to satisfy the other, because the other is used to the bed to be straightened out, and not to be wrinkled. This is the system. This is how they applied it. Another example. Someone has the idea of to spend money. To spend money and don't worry about what comes later. Doesn't like the idea of saving money. Another person wants to save. They say we could get a house or we could get something. All of these are why they have an engagement, that they have to understand each other. And they have to ask each other and get acquainted to each other. And to be honest with you, I'm really against this idea of marrying at a long distance. We knew each other in the internet, and we'll look at each other's pictures and then just go get married. Very risky. If while they're meeting and getting acquainted for years at a time, it's tough. What about if we just get acquainted and just see an image or talk on the phone or something? If someone is very social, for example, like people and like to mingle, like to go out, and the other side doesn't want guests or going out or to come or to go, to find that she just goes out by herself. Where's your husband? She should be ashamed. You will have to agree from the beginning. Are you socializing people and you like people and to meet with people, or you like to be just on our own and not be involved? These are points that we have to discuss. There's no one is right and wrong, but they're both. Sometimes both could be engaged and they could leave each other. Say there must have been a problem. No, it doesn't mean that there's a problem. It means that the two might be good, but are just not good for each other, or not compatible. Just like Saint Moses the Strong. They saw him once socializing people and saying Arsenius would refuse to meet with people. And they say, well, which is the better trend? It's like, this is good and this is good. This one glorifies God one way and this one glorifies the other way. So we have to agree to the approach. Someone who's very organized and the other one is very messy. One who's just take off the sock or the shirt and throw it in place, and the other person would go nuts at that. They must agree. Someone, for example, who's very punctual in their times, and they're on time to the second, and they even like to get to the place even ahead of schedule. The other one would be like, yeah, so we'll get there. You know, the people get late, so we will arrive late. Different personalities. Where do you get it from? Get it from family of origin. Someone likes to pay the bills as soon as the bill arrives, to pay it immediately, which is the utilities, water, electric, and so on and so forth. These bills, like to pay them right away. They want a good credit score. The other one would set aside, oh, when God provides, I don't care about the credit score. And they'll be always late and pay late fees. By the way, these things, you think that they're minor, but these are things that could drive one of the two sides to insanity. If one is used to paying right away, the other side could go crazy. And the other side insists that they should give it to the party that pays everything on time. That we don't know how to organize our matters and see what we agree on. If this is their responsibility, well, it's going to get paid anyway. Agree on what's the system, and the side that is more punctual or takes care of things, I could be good at something else that I could take it, the responsibility. But to keep fighting because we don't know how to organize our affairs, that's the tough part. Cleanliness at home. People who would eat something and leave in the kitchen for 2 or 3 days. You'd say, no, we have to clean right away. And someone would say, want to know anything, and the other side wants to, they just want to eat or drink or throw up. Or someone who wants someone to eat in a certain way, with utensils, fork and knife, and place this I don't know how, and that's their nature. And the other side wants to eat and dip or get in there. They can't be compatible. But it cannot go with those who like to eat with utensils and are neat and so on and so forth. This is, either is good, but those two cannot live together because they'll drive each other crazy. And so on and so forth. So these two systems that each side is used to do something in a certain way. And they have to understand each other very much. And they have to have a lot of love between them so they can get through this love, this first phase that has all of these differences. Sometimes the problem is personal choices or preferences. For example, at their wedding night, they went to sleep, they went to bed after all the celebrations. So she went to sleep on the right side. So he's like, no, I'm used to sleeping on the right hand side. He's like, well, you're by yourselves. So now they're both sleeping on the right side, both of them. How are they going to sleep? So he went to open the bed, for example, in Egypt, because he's used to something to go to open the window in the summer. You know, I'm just giving you examples. So what are you doing? It's like, I'm used to sleeping with the window open. She cannot do that. Someone who's used to have it high temperature, someone else the temperature should be very low, that it's a little chilly just to be able to sleep. So how could they resolve all these things? The difference is that each one is used to something, that there must be a compromise. This idea of compromise or concession, that we have to compromise. So when I proceed to get married, I have to understand that on everything I do it my way. We have to agree on how to agree to comfort each other. And as much as each side would have love and sacrifice for the other, they give or they sacrifice for the other. Sometimes it could be in major matters, like children. Someone says, I don't want children at all. I'm baffled. Someone says, I don't want us to have children at all, of their will. Not that they can't. Or someone would say just one child. Some would say, I want 4 or 5. So they have to have an understanding of all these matters. Someone is used to telling everything to her mother in full details, and the other one would not like that all of the private matters of the home are going out to the house and to his aunt. Or someone who's so stingy, and the other one likes to have fun and spend. All of these things are variations and differences from the background that I bring, and I'm coming into a project of marriage. So I must understand, so that the successful marriage, there must be the idea that I must concede. To concede means to descend a little bit, or to be a little humble, that it cannot be my way that goes in everything. That's why for the engagement time, not to be a long distance and to be at least a year, and each one would be themselves. No one is pretending or putting up an act. No one is acting, just like the fish guy. For my sake, every time they go out and he used to eat fish, although he hated fish, and he would eat fish just to get married. But after they got married, he's like, I'm not going to eat fish no matter what. So each one should be as themselves. Not just to show that they love him, that you force feed him fish, and then it turns out that he doesn't like fish, and then you would have a problem because you like fish and he cannot stand fish. So both should know what's their preference. So imagine these are the things that they say. If all these things that I say, here I'm talking about two, for example, Coptic, Orthodox, same culture, same language, same everything, and they still have all these problems between them. Imagine if someone from a different country, a different culture, a different language, and sometimes a different faith, sometimes is baptized from another faith, someone who gets baptized for love for Christ and love for Christianity, that's one thing. But those who get baptized just for the sake of marriage, and he was not able to separate between love and the new faith that they're going into, that's usually not the best. Because they have to start on the right footing to continue in the right footing. That's why the last thing I'll say, be ready for concession, that there is an element of concession in marriage. Number 2, know the nature of the other and accept them as they are. You accept them as they are. That's it. Before that, we say that each one would be on their own or themselves. Just accept them as they are. Number 3, change yourself so you could satisfy yourself, but don't try to change the other person. Meaning that if you want to make the other person happy, that's fine, but don't try to change the other person, because that's love. Number 4, know what makes the other person happy as much as you can, because this is love, and this is how to concede for your to cut your will off, which includes when I'm under the monastic obedience of someone else. So at home, we're under the submission and love of someone else. So this is a schooling or a training in virtue and love and sacrifice and giving. So Christianity truly indeed is the school of virtue. Our topic next time is understand the nature of the other. They must understand the nature of the other. Our topic next week, and glory be to God forever. Amen.
بسم الآب والابن والروح القدس إله الواحد آمين.
We return one time, my beloved, with your questions. There's a question in English. Just for the sake of it's in English, I'll reply in Arabic because here we watch in Arabic. And so you could also know which channel broadcast in Arabic. It will say in Arabic, the Arabic meeting. And in English, it'll be written the weekly meeting, and that has the English translation in it. So just for you to know the system when you're asking. But I'll read it in English and I'll reply in Arabic. Question reads, how do I know spiritual dryness is because of your own sins or because God wills it for you? And what should I focus on in this period of dryness? So the spiritual dryness, or what we call sometimes lukewarmth, spiritual lukewarmth, God allows these to happen, or we could probably be the cause of it because we're distant from God. Whether God allowed it or we are far from God, I must know what are the factors that led to it. God told to the angel of the Ephesians, remember from where you fell, that I have against you that you left your first love. Of course, this love brings about spiritual heat or spiritual warmth, because it says, I rejoiced in those who told me, let's go to the house of the Lord. But when I find myself laxed, I come late, that I'm not happy. So there's a problem, there's dryness, there's lukewarmth. So a person needs to see what happened, and to say with his father confession, and to remember where he fell from, to remember what caused this, and repent and do the first deeds, and go back to the first deeds when you were spiritually fervent and worshiping God. Someone I know has finding a husband, and she feels stressed because everyone is getting married except her. How can I get her to believe that God has a plan for her and that she needs to trust in Him? Of course, late marriage for girls could be from several factors. The first reason is that the number of girls in most societies is higher than the number of men. Okay? That could be a factor. Since the number of boys are less, it could be that there are girls who could be delayed a little bit. Of course, there are times that she could be that she's in a place. I know in one of the churches, a servant who told me that we have very perfect, lovely girls, but we can't find, as far as their spirituality and their looks and their family and their culture and everything, but they're away from mingling and they're looking for someone who's like them. But because they're distant, so they cannot find a chance to get acquainted. That's why as a church we try to open opportunities for people to get to know each other. But of course, I don't want to say the idea of that God has a plan to everyone. Of course, God has a plan for every person. But the idea also is that since I, as a person, chose the path of marriage, that I have to open channels and not be shy. It's like, oh no, I don't want someone to introduce me to someone. You don't want someone to introduce you to someone, and you don't have a chance to get acquainted. So you will stay until time passes, and then you say, I didn't get married. The culture sometimes, but when they introduce you to each other, after some time, you choose whether you continue or not. That's up to you. No one forced you that you must get married. No. But at least let's introduce you to each other. You say, when you know this person, how about getting to know them? Sure, no problem. Let's get acquainted. If they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. Okay? Because sometimes we say it's the will of God. Well, I don't do my part. I have to do my part in order to open the channels to see what the will of God is through these channels. I have a person who's very acquainted, close to me, because of bad circumstances that happened with his family, and refuses to get married, and they're over 40. Now his regret that there were problems between the father and mother, so he has a complex against marriage, and he's past 40 now. Now he regrets it. Of course, he feels that he got old. When will he start his life? When he will get acquainted? When will he have kids? So now he could start regretting that he's alone. The older he gets, he begins to, his sense of loneliness increases when we get old. Okay, I began to feel lonely. But at the same time, you say, I'm just going to still start. Sometimes they would say, well, I'm just comfortable this way. I'm not going to get myself any heartache. This is just an idea. It's wrong, because it doesn't have love or sacrifice in it. And then, but it's very difficult because of his age, and rarely would you find someone compatible to his age. So what you should do, what do you think, and what do you advise him? I advise him to, as I said, that there are girls who could be also a little older or mature. I'll be very honest with you, and no one get upset whether it's the person they're asking for or the person who has the question. Someone who's in their 40s and wants someone in her 20s, that's wrong. To be honest with you, that's wrong. You made a decision that you will postpone marriage. Why to come to mistreat someone who has a big difference between them? Because I'm mourning because it's my duty. The bigger the difference, the more the problem is. This 15-year difference, someone who's 40-something and someone who's 20-something, 15, 20 years difference is not right. So you must look for someone who's in their mid-30s, for example, to be compatible. to be suitable. You can't be 40 something and you want to marry someone who's 20 something. That's wrong. So make some concessions and be reasonable. There are a lot of girls that you could choose from them, but he should be reasonable. Is marriage from God or from people? Marriage is a personal choice. That's it. That I'm comfortable with the person and I'd like to be involved with them, so I should take my time. That's it. Why in the wedding prayer ceremony, the prayer we say the bride to do not frown in front of him. So, do you want her to frown in front of him? That's the frowny type. That's like the grumpy type. So we say, do not frown. Do not frown. Upset yourself and upset him and upset everyone. And if we do not literally mean those words, why do we? No, we literally mean them actually. We don't want him to make his life miserable. And every time you see her that she's grumpy and frowny, and no, we mean it. You can answer in Arabic, I'll understand. Well, thank you. He's giving me the chance to answer in Arabic or English. No. Do not frown. I don't know what it was, the translation, but it's not right to be always frowning and to complaining and to be upset. This is uncomfortable. No, we mean these words literally. In the miracle of resurrecting Lazarus, what does it mean that Christ was disturbed in the spirit? As a human being, Jesus Christ has a human flesh and human spirit. And the human spirit, he submitted on the cross. He said in your hands that he was disturbed, as a human spirit, as human feelings. And someone who loved died. And then there's another explanation that says that he was upset to what human condition came, but the most basic, direct explanation is that he was troubled as a human being who has human feelings from the situation of his friend who died. My problem is that my husband is incompetent, that he wants to overcompensate by wanting to control. I understand what kind of incompetence, because this combination exists. And to decide, make decision everything, and by fighting and by insulting and yelling, and he doesn't have any sort of respect to me and my family, although I agree with him that I stand next to him almost like a man and I'm helping him, and he denies all that as though without any appreciation or gratitude, and he's not honest, and he's upset, and so on and so forth. Look, what will you practice with them? Number one, humility. They have to be very humble, and to forbearance, and to encourage that he has a deficiency, that he had low self-esteem situation. If you made him feel this deficiency, you will bring out the worst in him, but always practice the things that I'm saying and endure, and this will make you Christ very happy, and God will reward you that you kept your household and you did not take the easy way out, the narrow, difficult path that leads to eternal life. Question: please, that a submission should be in marriage, not in dating, because what we're talking about marriage, we're not talking about dating in any way. We have nothing to do with this dating business. And they accuse girls of being stubborn when they don't submit. But if she's serious, she has to understand what his tendencies is. If she is trying to control in the time of courting or engagement, he will control more. So what they practice together in engagement time, she has to have the red flags come up when she finds that something's not right. Why Christ chose to be incarnate in the form of a man, although he's a spirit? Because you see that they say man is better than woman. Well, if you would have been incarnate as a woman, they would say the same, make the argument. Well, he has to be incarnate in some form. Very strange questions. Also, Jesus Christ, the church takes the female because the church is the bride, so the bride has to have a groom. So you cannot have a female groom and a female groom. Then, according to the analogy, we became lesbians. Let's not have these strange. Christ is the head of the church as a man, and the church is the bride of Christ. Let's not have these strange ideas that come from the world that have no meaning to them. If Christ was Someone wrote a very long question. If I read that long question, I will take the rest of the remaining time segment. The writer of that question. I will look into that question later because it needs time to be read. If the wife is not comfortable in the life with the in-laws, does she have the right to ask that they not come to them again? This phrase of not comfortable in the arrangement, meaning, is it in the sense of visits or that they're living with her? If the in-laws are living with them, she has the right to ask the husband to separate for them. But if they're just visiting, this needs more study and intervention from the priest to look into it and see why these things happen. Although before marriage they agreed that to live with their husband by themselves, and means that so this means that they're living with them. If you promised before that you live by yourself, then you have to deliver on that promise, and this is causing a lot of problems. No, you have to give her the right to live independently, that a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his woman. It's a very clearly spelled out verse. Does not need any clarification. When I was recently engaged, I was wondering if the pre-marriage classes are still being held at the Coptic Church. Yes, but they're all online. Do they give these pre-marriage classes? They give them online. What do you think of a man who is on his phone all day on Facebook, and when he calls him, he doesn't answer us when we call him, and when the kids and us try to talk to him, he says this is wrong. He keeps looking at me as wrong, and I am upset at this. Could you tell him something, because he's listening to you now? So I could tell you, and I don't tell him. So I would tell you what made him on the phone and on the internet, and who's he talking to, and his other interests. Is he not happy at home? Maybe you need to change something about him to make him happy at home. I remember in the sermon of His Holiness Pope Shenouda, may God rest his soul, is titled, "With you I do not want anything," with God, that is, I do not want anything on earth. So in his contemplation, he used to say that sometimes the husband can tell his wife in the beginning that with you, a husband can tell his wife, with you, I do not want anything on earth, that he wants to finish his work quickly and come back to her. But when problems start and increase, he starts to say that he's out with his friends on the phone or anything else, because the problems increased. So before I tell him, change yourself, you must understand what are the factors that led to him where he is, and to him I would tell him, take care of your family, because they have a duty towards you. You have a duty towards them. I would talk to both sides at the same time, simultaneously. A lot of people who are very happy with this series of lecture series, and I hope that they benefited. But the important thing is that we would hear and apply, and just not pretending to just hear. That we would turn it to a real life, that we would stay together and see how each one of us can change our lives. What is the benefit of mentioning the dead person and the deceased person in the liturgy? And could it forgive the small sins? There are a lot of reasons. It forgives sins from the last time, but we couldn't confess. And it forgives all the little things. It has a lot of benefits. So what? You're not going to pray for them? After the person dies, and say, just go bury him? This is a type of love and loyalty. You don't want us to pray for the deceased? There are verses that support the prayer for the deceased. I have a problem that I suffer with my husband is disrespect, and I got very upset, and he would apologize, and then he would repeat. I don't know what to do with that, although I love him, and he is nice, kind, and gentle, but I don't know what to do about this disrespect matter. We'll be married for 32 years. Wow. I talked about this, I covered this point of lecture. I don't remember. Just go on every lecture every Thursday and listen to the lecture on respect. Because as we said, there must be love, there must be respect between the two spouses. So please refer to the lecture of respect. And respect complements love or sustains love. They both go together. And respect is that I do not do anything that diminish respect. No one should tell someone else to respect them, that I must impose upon the other the respect of me. And if his nature is disrespect, Abuna must come and tell him that disrespect is not a good thing. My wife cheated on me and I forgave her, but doubt always makes me restless in her obscure way of using Facebook and phone. If your husband has forgiven you for cheating, but it's true cheating, not a suspicion of cheating, if he had forgiven you, you must endure that there'll be a time where you have to restore trust and you have to cancel your Facebook completely, and your phone should be without a password because he still has doubt within him that will take some time. It's a good thing that he forgave you, and he didn't say we'll go to clerical council, for example. Someone is saying that I see the idea that the man is the head of the woman is making the women crazy, and they want to be the head if she's successful, although the husband could also be the reason of her success. These days, I said, what's the notion? This head and responsibility. He's responsible, and he goes and works and provides for the family, and she's also providing at home. But now the woman also goes out and work, so the woman should also be humble and seeing that I work and I don't need him, because she could have an opposite effect. It was like, now my career, and I can be independent and I can leave him anytime, no problem. But this is what we suffer from because of this life that we live so far. It has a lot of negative side effects. Why does divorce increase? Because of these ideas. But if he would be a humble head and she would be a humble body, even if her career goes up or she's successful, not make him ever feel that he is less, because she could be also more successful, because she could be far more successful than him, and she could be even making more money, and this could be a cause of real crisis if there is no humility and love in this family. Someone in the comments is telling me the idea of fixing the bed is beautiful example, so that they don't disagree. Problems usually are much more significant than that. Marriage, your grace, is to feel for the other and to do what they are. These are comments, but it's a good comment. I hope all the youth would listen to your lectures. Oh, these comments, people. I thought that they're questions, but I thank you. And I hope that this series would be of benefit to you. There are people who told me, when will we get back to the spiritual topics? Most lecturers talk about spiritual topics, and I'm the same. But I also see that it's important that we would take this series so we could talk about family matters. And by the way, family matters is part of sound spiritual life. We're not talking about any marriage. You're talking about marriage in Christianity. So it's not something that's away from our spiritual life. These are the principles. The principles of what marriage is, and the family is the nucleus or the building block that builds the entire church. So the family must be strong so that the church will be strong.
في ناس بقى
There are people who believe in what?
My husband deeply believes in
My
horoscopes.
husband deeply believes in horoscopes.
الأبراج
The zodiac and, you know, your daily horoscope and all of this sorcery.
He literally describes and treats himself and myself.
He literally
each
describes and
person in our
treats
life
myself and
according
myself and each person
his or her horoscope
and
sign.
their life according to their horoscope sign, which is the zodiacs and all that stuff.
اللي هو الأبراج. في ناس
There are people who read a lot into these topics, and these things are confusing to people because they consider that every zodiac has its characteristics, so they began to deal with everyone according to their zodiac sign. And there is an idiom in Arabic saying that sorcerers lied even if they were on point, meaning that we cannot depend on the sorcery of those people. Sometimes it could be a study to it, but we cannot also depend on it in everything. What are your thoughts of the in-laws being a different class and having different values? How does that affect the marriage for the kids? If you wait for a couple of weeks, the topic will be about the in-laws. So please, if I don't answer your question in 2 weeks, you can ask me this question again. We'll talk about the in-laws and the family of both sides, how to deal with them. Just as you've seen, there are a lot of problems that are a result of that, so we will answer this extensively when its time comes. There are 2 or 3 times more still to go.
How can someone change themselves when it comes?
How can someone change themselves when it comes to fixing their temporary attitude when it's affecting relationships you care about? I will speak within the context of marriage. If they love each other and they're married and there's true love, they're both going to be working on themselves first with the help of the other. Meaning that I have to work on myself, that it's a full-time job to fix myself. It's a full-time job to fix myself. So I'm not ready to fix the other, but the other person should help me to help myself. So in marriage, each one tries to fix themselves. As for temper and attitude, this has treatments. They could go to a therapist if they feel that they have a problem in their attitude or they have a temper. They go. They say, well, I have a problem. And they talk with the therapist or the counselor and they try to find solutions to that behavioral problems. I believe we should stop here. We'll stop here tonight with questions because our time is up. And through the grace of Christ, we'll continue next week, next time. And Lord willing, I will answer the other questions, the rest of the questions. There are some questions that I have not answered yet. I will answer throughout next week, and before next week I would have finished all the questions that you sent. I thank you, and I'm very glad of your presence with me in the meeting. May God keep you and give us strong Christian families. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Through We'll through the intercessions of Saint Mary, we'll say Axies to Saint Mary. Make us worthy to pray thankfully, saying, Our Father who art in heaven, kingdom come. Be thy name, thy kingdom come, on earth as in heaven. Give us their daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, we forgive those trespass against us. Lead us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil. Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen. Love of God the Father, the grace of the only begotten Son, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the fellowship and the gift of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace. May the peace of God be with you all.
Gina.